My name is Julia Rhodes, and I'm going to let you all in on a little secret. Standing in front of this crowd, especially as a self-professed introvert, is by far the most terrifying thing I've ever done in my life. In fact, I'm pretty proud that so far I haven't ripped off the microphone and sprinted backstage. But let me try and explain what sparked my activist spirit, because that's the only thing that's keeping me grounded in place right now. Try to imagine a world full of perpetual hunger, to the point where rats or feces qualify for a feast. Try to imagine a world of working 12 plus hours of hard labor a day, with no hope for a brighter tomorrow. Try to imagine a world where you can't tell anyone else these atrocities. And while this reality may seem more fit for a Stephen King novel, it's the unfortunate truth that persists within North Korea's borders. And I used to think of this country pretty simplistically, just as a militant belligerent that hated America. And it's not hard to fall into that trap. I mean, North Korea is not really a sexy topic. You don't see politicians or celebrities advocating against political prison camps. Actually, scratch that. You might see the basketballer Dennis Rodman hanging out with his best pal Kim Jong-un, but I don't think anyone's too sure what that actually is. Regardless, I waited for some brave, passionate activist to come and lead the cavalry against these atrocities, and I would be ready and willing to lend my support. But behind the scenes, of course, I, an awkward and introverted girl, could never put on the cape, so to speak, and actually become an activist. No, that was reserved for those outspoken introverts. But no one spoke up. No one came to save the day. So, as the famous civil rights activist Audrey Lord said, I spoke, even though my voice shook. And it's my belief that introverts, and really any regular Joe, have the necessary skills to completely and utterly shake the status quo and become powerful activists for social change. But what actually is an introvert? Student Susan Cain brought this concept into our vocabularies, really destigmatized it with her novel, Quiet, The Power of Introverts, which I highly recommend. This book explains that not all introverts are shy, awkward, and gawky, though I certainly am one of those types. Rather, we love to understand things, and understanding ourselves can give us a sort of anchor in a tumultuous world. We crave going deep below the surface and asking the big questions. And we get a little overwhelmed in busy situations, and we crave alone time because it keeps us sane and recharges us. But when did I realize that I fit into this category? Probably in 5th grade, when my dad's work brought me to England, where I stuck out like a sore thumb. I was the lone Yank in a very tight-knit English village, at a time when the world really wasn't loving America that much. So I resolved to turn myself inward, constantly critiquing myself in the hopes of becoming more British than Queen Elizabeth. It didn't work out so well. Moreover, I've also gone to a Quaker school for almost all my life. Quaker, to many people, means granola bars or oatmeal. However, Quakers stress individual connections with God, and as such, don't use priests as a medium. So once a week, for 45 minutes, we sit in silence during meeting for worship. Though some choose to speak, this offers us an opportunity to sit and reflect, something that, to an introvert, has been a gift to me. And I found that there's something particularly rebellious about self-reflection today. Through Facebook and social media, we consciously construct our best selves. But Who am I outside of the cacophony of social media? Who am I when no one's watching? Strangely, but also fittingly, I found my answer within the pages of Escape from Camp 14, written by Blaine Harden. This book details the narrative of Shin Donghyuk, the first and so far only person to have been born in and escaped from a North Korean political prison camp. And what I found most atrocious about Shin's reality was the juxtaposition between my life and Shin's. I've grown up in a pretty safe suburban state, and Shin grew up in an environment that demanded cruelty. Classmates would sometimes attack or kill a student if he fell behind on his work quota. Reduced to abject starvation, Shin would eat feces, mice, or really anything else. Shin grew up in an environment that demanded cruelty and was told that his treasonous blood merited beatings from camp guards and teachers alike. And what I find almost more atrocious than the truth of Shin's reality is the world's inability to confront it. These concentration camps have existed for 60 years longer than the Nazi counterparts and have claimed over 400,000 lives. And while the United Nations has recently issued a report about North Korea, which is a monumental first step, we still have a ways to go in rectifying the situation. And after finishing the book, my own journey began. With my Amnesty International club at school, we began to host lunchtime presentations, foreign policy debates, and all in the hopes of inviting our own personal celebrity, Blaine Harden, the author of Escape from Camp 14, to come and speak to our high school. And my friend Emily, who's also an introvert, continues to make these beautifully designed infographics regarding Korean and other atrocities. They're called Atrocities Behind Closed Doors, ABCDs. We hang them up behind bathroom stalls and on urinals. So there's literally no way to escape North Korea at my school. And through confronting the realities of this underreported nation, I found that introverts have a louder voice than we may once have thought. And I think it's necessary to look at the qualities of superstar activist paths to see that really they employ the same qualities that we do. And I've boiled these down into the C qualities. S for social awareness, E for empathy, A for analysis, and A for action. So first, we have the basic fact that our environment instills specific norms, goals, and routines in us. Martin Luther King, for instance, recognized that the mechanized structure of society forced minorities to view themselves as impersonal cogs in a turning wheel. Similarly, sometimes I worry that teens can see ourselves as individuals unlinked to the world. But are we resigned to carry out the dictates of our realities? I'm not inclined to believe so. In order to practice a conscious, developing, lucid awareness, we must constantly and painstakingly analyze ourselves and our worldviews. And this is where introversion can come in handy, since we have a predisposition for internal exploration. And thinking in activism in this light always sort of surprised me, because this follows a think first, act second dynamic. When I thought of activism, I thought of some sort of indescribable passion that just motivated people to protest. Essentially, I didn't think an activist could be contemplative, shy, or maybe even terrified of crowds. And moreover, there's a much more difficult sense of consciousness to attain, a sort of historical awareness. It's the point where you find yourself at the crux of the wave, where justice and history collide. Martin Luther King recognized this in his Nobel Peace Prize acceptance speech, noting the historical imperativeness of nonviolence for the future of the world, not just for African Americans in Alabama at the time. Similarly, when I think of North Korean prison camps, I think of future generations critiquing our hypocrisy after claiming never again after the Holocaust, but turning a blind eye as a similar system proliferates. And introversion really forces us to figure out the whys, whats, and hows of people. And humans have a biological predisposition to care for our immediate communities. And with social media, it's even easier to expand our definition of community. However, it can be a little difficult in seeing a Syrian refugee as akin to a neighbor. That's where it's important to create these mental linkages, to assess the same kind of base solidarity we have for our friends and family, and transfer it to those living halfway across the world. That way, we can hope to understand, or at least empathize with those living under oppression, when we ourselves are not. And this empathy can spark anger in an activist. And anger can be a pretty tricky emotion, because it can lead to irrational action. However, anger is an incredible tool for fomenting social change. Martin Luther King stressed the importance of well-directed anger. For instance, rage at a racist individual won't accomplish as much as fury over a society that perpetuates injustice. Therefore, we must analyze the true roots of this anger. We must identify the system that maintains inequality, figure out its nuts and bolts, and then shut it down. Similarly, I found anger to be an incredibly liberating force. It made me not care about doing things that were uncool or dorky, such as hosting foreign policy debates and getting a little overexcited reading the news. I realized that the cause I was promoting was more important than any high school apathy. So thinking of anger in terms of this light can really make introverts feel a lot better, since our cause becomes more about our passions and less about our personal uncomfort. But again, anger is only the first step on a windy staircase. Historian and civil rights activist W.E.B. Du Bois said that history has taught him that it's not enough to be angry. The supreme task is to organize and unite people so that their anger becomes a transforming force. And I think that taking action is a healthy next step on the progression to be a conscious activist. Because anger, without the reinforcement of action, can just ricochet around in your mind. And quite frankly, too much anger might give you ulcers, and you don't want that. But I think there's also a sort of poetic beauty in seeing your anger flow out into real action. But at first, I was a little apprehensive about this stage in an activist. Actually, writing letters to representatives or hosting foreign policy debates terrified me. What if I look like an idiot? Or what if I fail? But from looking at the paths of the great activists, I can see that failure is just another way to success. Martin Luther King saw the Chicago race riots not as an example of any sort of racial inferiority, but just another example of the cruelty of society which forced minorities in a situation where they had to act. So failure can illuminate facets that we've previously unseen. And moreover, to the second hesitancy, why try to fix an unfixable situation? I say that action changes us and reinforces our beliefs, and it can help erase some of the pain of failure. And while the beauty of activism may not always outweigh the pain of failure, I like to think that history has offered us enough examples where, after a while, failure can transform into success. But perhaps clinging on to history as I do just makes me a youthful optimist. And really, I think I'm kind of okay with that. And moreover, when I used to think of activism, I used to think of one person who could control a group, who loved public speaking, and could really work the spotlight. something kind of terrifying to an introvert like myself. But change, generally speaking, sparks from groups. Within groups, we can find psychological support. There, you're not just a crazy person with a big idea. Groups also ground us, making sure our cause stays pertinent to society, which is incredibly helpful. So for us activists, we can help offer our own perspective. And moreover, for us introverts, we can forego the excruciating small talk in lieu of discussing ideas of real gravity and consequence to us. So for we mortals, thinking of activism in terms of a group dynamic takes a lot of weight off our shoulders. And it's my firm belief that introverts, or really any average person, can and should be powerful activists for social change. Winning a Nobel Peace Prize or headlining in the New York Times doesn't define success. I found success when I saw my Facebook friends posting about North Korea, making clever political cartoons about the hunger in North Korea, and my personal favorite, making original raps about Kim Jong-un. This showed me that these students really cared enough about a complex and faraway problem to express it in their own ways. So I've learned that the pain and terror of failure vanishes when we understand how important our cause is. As Margaret Mead, the famous anthropologist, said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." Thank you.